Today's episode is going to get a little woo. We're talking astrology. And I know, but stick with me for this one. Because I think my guest today, my dear friend Marci, was standing in a place a lot of you are standing in right now. Not unhappy, not in crisis, just wondering if maybe you're meant for something more. Marci found astrology in that exact in between space. And today she's going to walk us through how she uses it. Not as magic, not as a crystal ball, but as a real honest to goodness guide. Here's my conversation with Marci. Let's get into it. So, welcome, Marci. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Hooray! Go Big Red. I love the Midwest. I love everything about the Midwest. I don't live there now, but for college, I ended up at Truman State University, where I met you, as well as a few of our other very good friends that we continue to be very connected with, despite the many decades now that we have left college. But shortly after college, I moved to Boston, Massachusetts. And in Boston, I ended up getting married as well as going to grad school in Boston. And after getting my MBA, my husband and I moved to New Jersey and I got a job in New York City, working for a financial company in New York City. Did that for quite a while and then proceeded to have 3 kids in 4.5 years. Don't do that. That was not smart. But stuff happens.
Right?
We have lived in New Jersey ever since. So we've been here for a couple decades now. And my oldest is, in fact, just graduated high school and will be going, funny enough, back to Boston for his undergrad. He's going to go into film studies.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I can't believe you're old enough to have a kid that graduated high school.
I know. Me neither. Especially since I'm only 37.
Right. And he was just born.
Right. Exactly. Prodigy. So, as I mentioned, I really started my career, I would say, like the bulk of my career, of my tenure in financial services and really in more of a relationship management, corporate type of environment. And I really enjoyed it for multiple reasons. I loved the structure of it. I loved the familiarity of it. I really loved the consistency of it and just felt that had plenty of opportunity to grow and to learn and to kind of evolve as I was in my career. But then in 2022, my grandfather on my father's side passed away, unfortunately. That being said, I was very lucky. I had all of my grandparents until I was well into my 40s. So I was very lucky, but he passed away in the fall of 2022. And one of the great things about a funeral is you have a chance to see all of your cousins and family that people, you just may not have had a chance to connect with recently. So I was able to spend a lot of time with my cousins there and people I haven't seen in, 10 years, 15 years. And one of my biggest takeaways at this funeral was my cousins are doing really cool things. For example, one of my cousins is a social worker. One of them is a will and trust lawyer, like really helping people plan out what's going to live beyond them and how that's going to impact their family members. I have another cousin who is a rehab counselor. I have another cousin who's a psychologist. And I really left that like, these people are doing incredible things. And what am I doing? I mean, yes, I'm raising my 3 children and I'm very, very fortunate for that. But in terms of my day job, it suddenly became very clear, like, I need to do something more. This isn't enough for me. I need to contribute and I need to be of service in something bigger than what I'm currently doing. Because when you kind of break down what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, I feel like I'm managing contracts and I'm winning deals for this organization multi-million dollar deals for this organization, but I'm also very replaceable. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it just kind of really hit me that it's not that I can't do this anymore. I just need something different because I felt just like I'm unfulfilled, is the best way to say it. And actually, if I really think back, I had this inkling really back in 2020. So, 2020 was obviously March and April of 2020 was extremely, for me anyway, it was very scary because the pandemic broke out and obviously we're in New Jersey. So, again, initially in that very early days, it was a huge breakout for New York and New Jersey. Everyone was scared. And the one thing I kept coming back to was I kept thinking to myself, I really wish I was in the hospitals right now. I really wish I was one of those nurses helping these patients with COVID. This is really what was going through my mind. And then on the other side of my mind, I'm like, are you nuts? Then you would get COVID and you would bring it home to your family. Like the logical
Yeah.
side starts to kick in. But it was like an itch that I had as far back as 2020 to be like, no, actually, what those healthcare workers are doing is so impactful and they are putting their lives on the line. I don't necessarily want to go that far, but just the fact that I am sitting at my home doing nothing while people are literally saving lives in the hospitals right now, it just really stirred something in me that I have got to do something of service.
I think it's really interesting, and I think a lot of people find themselves in this place where, they are happy. They are fulfilled in their jobs. They have a great life, but there is kind of like you said that itch that you need to scratch, that you just feel like you're meant for more. I've
Yes.
heard that from many people.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And actually, that space between I know I need to do something different, but I don't know what it is. A lot of people don't, they kind of gloss over that when they talk about their stories. That's a really annoying space. And it's really frustrating to just know there's something else, but I don't know what it is. And I remember just kind of sitting there dwelling in this very awkward place of, I just don't know what it is, but I can't do just this anymore. Like, I really feel like I'm going to go crazy if I don't do something. So I didn't know it was going to be astrology at the time, but I found myself probably scrolling too much on the Instagram and the TikTok and all of that, because I just felt really, blah. And the powers of Instagram, I stumbled upon one of the astrologers who then became one of my instructors. And she just had a simple post about just one simple component of your birth chart. And I was like, wow, that in itself just explains so much to me. If anyone's familiar with astrology, it was just a post about Uranus in your birth chart and how that shows up and how it presents itself. And I was like, I cannot believe that little post just made me feel so overwhelmed with that makes so much sense. And then I kind of sat there with it and I took a look at some of her other things and I'm like, yeah, I need to explore this further. And as it would have it, one of the other astrologers that popped up was offering a course. And it was a pretty significant investment. But keep in mind, I had never had an astrology reading at all in my life at this point. Yes, I had always kind of followed astrology, like, when we were growing up and we had magazines like Vogue and, all of those, I would flip to my horoscope in the back all the time to see what it said. And, it was always something kind of back in my head, but never anything beyond that. So when she was offering this course, and again, I had never had an astrology reading, there was just something overwhelming that told me, you have to do this. And it was an investment. So I remember going to my husband and I'm like, listen, I get it. This doesn't make sense, but I have to do it. I just had this feeling like I have to do this. So I had to let go of all those voices that are no, like, no, this is not logical. What are you doing? You don't have time for this. And I did it. And I did the course. And then after the course, I did all the work in it. And the whole time in the course, like it was hard to concentrate on anything else because all I wanted to do was learn this. It was just incredible for me. Like that process of learning was so cool. And maybe it's because I'd been away from the educational environment for a long time, but getting back into it was really nurturing for me. So I went in, did the course, was certified. And then, like, the real test comes when I started meeting with people and I started meeting with clients and applying what I had just learned. There's two distinct things that happened during my readings with some of my clients. I didn't charge anything in the beginning because I was still practicing. But the first thing was I felt like during some of the conversations, something else was taking over me during these conversations. I would literally have a conversation with somebody about the astrology and I'd be like, where did that come from? Who said that? But it was just something I was just so in the flow of. And it was like things were just coming out of me. Like I didn't think about this. It just happened. And to me, that was magical, number one. But the other thing was I had to stop scheduling these sessions in the evening because after doing a reading, I couldn't go to bed. I couldn't sleep because I was just so like energized by this conversation. Those things was like huge alarm bells going off to me. This is not something you can ignore. You have got to pursue this. And so I did. Now, I have to layer in the reality of the situation, which is I had a family to take care of, so I could only devote so much time to it. And I still had my career in front of me because, financially it did not make sense to just up and leave your career. So for me, I'm just way too practical for that. And I couldn't do that. So the important point was I found a way to do it and to incorporate it in my life, but to obviously be able to still manage my home, my family, and my career to ensure that financial security as well.
So, talk a little bit about kind of what was that process like when you first started to build this as because it's a real side gig for you.
hmm hmm I love that you asked that question because I really feel like this is that part of it, the process of building it is really hard and it's really scary, and we don't talk about it enough. I don't know. Do you ever listen to Glennon Doyle?
Yeah.
So she has a podcast. It's called We Can Do Hard Things. But she coined this. And I when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so true. But she calls it the messy middle. So it's the middle part of, okay, you make a decision to do something. And then at the end, let's say you're successful and everything's great and you're very happy with this thing. And a lot of times when people come on and they share their story and they talk about, yeah, I did this pivot, blah, blah, blah. But they talk about this point when everything started and when they made the decision. And then they talk about this point when you're kind of arrived or you're at that kind of end point where, yes, this is very successful and very filling. But nobody talks about this in between area, which is called the messy middle. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true because to me, that's the hardest part. And in the beginning, when you make this decision, you have like a lot of rah, 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 that good for you. That's so awesome. And then you don't really hear anything because you're hard at work trying to make this other thing happen or this other pivot take place. But I think that's where we kind of go wrong as a culture and a society because it's that messy middle where you need a lot of support. Because I will tell you, anytime you're going through a pivot, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but I feel like I've gone through like 4 or 5 pivots in my life, like dramatic changes. And every single one of them was terrifying. Every single one of them. Like I went to college and I knew nobody. Scary, overwhelming, really hard. Turned out to be a great decision. As I mentioned earlier, I picked up and I moved to Boston. Scary, really hard, terrifying, but it was the right choice. So there's that, like, when I look back and I think about what would I have wanted during these pivots and during these changes, I would have loved to have somebody say, hey, I'm with you. Good for you for doing this. And I know this next step is hard because, like, if I just take this example of my career and kind of pivoting to this side hustle, it's so hard. And I'm sure you can relate to this a lot too. You're in a career, you're in a job, you know what you're doing, you can do a good job, you know what your measurements are, you know what success looks like, and you've been there long enough, you have the right connections, you have the right reputations to kind of feel good about what you're doing every day. And then you start something brand new, and guess what? You're really bad at it. You're kind of terrible at it. And you make a lot of mistakes and you tend to take it very personal, but also you kind of start to feel very alone because pivots aren't, again, like not everyone does a pivot because they are really hard to do, but also not enough people are talking about that messy middle part.
Right.
So I just think that's so, so, so important that we kind of shed light on that because it is really hard to do.
Yeah. Did you have kind of like a mentor for that messy middle part then to kind of guide you, or did you use astrology, like what you were learning with that and that?
Yeah, I didn't have a mentor. I mean, I did and I didn't. So what I call her my astro bestie. She was doing it with me and she actually launched a few months ahead of me. So I kind of had her to kind of help. Okay, what'd you do that worked? What'd you do that didn't work? So a little bit. And she was also going through a pretty significant pivot because she did a total 180. I had her and, her and I could definitely connect on, wow, this is really hard, this, and this. That felt really good. But it also would have been better to have someone who was already at the end to come and say, okay, yep, yes, you only got this result, but hey, that's okay. Like someone who's kind of walked that walk with you. She was kind of walking it with me, which is great. You've got
Yeah.
some company, but it's kind of the blind leading the blind, quite honestly. And our circumstances were different too. She was able to devote a lot more time to her marketing because, just that was her situation where I couldn't because of my situation. So it was still different enough that there were still moments that's like, oh, I really wish there was someone giving me more insight and guidance on this. That being said, it's also kind of part of my own personality that I do like figuring things out on my own at the same time. So it would be really nice to have a little bit of a mentor during when you're going through that. Looking back, I wish I had that at every pivot I did. But there's also a lot of pride in me that I did do these big changes and pivots, and I'm here to tell the story about it. It's something to talk about, it's something to be proud of, quite honestly. But yeah, a lot of it was just figuring it out and what worked, what doesn't work. Does this feel right? No. Okay, I'm not going to do that. And then not only is it about launching a business and trying to make all the decisions that come with that, it was also, okay, but I still want to study astrology. I still need to practice my craft, if you will. So it was also trying to manage launching a business, doing the marketing, but also continuing to deepen my knowledge because obviously the business is reliant on me being able to produce a solid reading. And I needed to really kind of strengthen my skills there too. The beginning couple years were definitely kind of a hard balance between both those things.
All while doing your day job and being a mom of 3 kids
That's right.
and a
That's
wife.
right. And a wife with a husband who had a very demanding job at the time. So, yeah, it was a lot. But that was also kind of worked in my favor that I could kind of spend the time I had and dial back down when I just didn't have the time. That was it was all on me essentially, which in many respects was good because I needed that flexibility at the time. So,
Was there a moment when you realized you had to do this?
yeah. I mean, it was really when I had those readings, like after I received my certification and I started meeting with people to kind of put this in practice, I was overwhelmed with how I felt after the reading. And I was kind of overwhelmed by the feedback I was getting as well. I was getting very positive feedback, but quite honestly, there was, that inner critic where I was like, okay, some of these people are my close friends. They're just floating my boat. Like, they're just like, you tried something new. Good job.
I didn't sound like that.
No. But so I did discount a little bit of what the feedback was, but what I could not discount was how I felt after this. And I just felt incredible. As I mentioned, I felt like things were speaking through me. I know that sounds a little woo woo, but it's true. Like I really felt like I didn't know where that came from. And I felt so energized by this exchange and this opportunity to be of service in such a powerful, spiritual, but also empowering way. And I know I talk a lot about that on other podcasts and in my newsletter and kind of all over my website too. But to me, that is the best part of astrology is the empowerment component of it. And I thought, wow, if I could translate this and help people and allow other people to feel that empowerment, to me, that yes, that's exactly what I want to be able to do for other people and be of service in that way.
So, one of the things I hinted at the last episode was that you're the person who gave me some direction in terms of when I lost my job. And leading up to that, I meet with Marci on a regular basis, both as a friend, but then also from an astrology perspective.
Yes. Yes.
But you were the first person to say, listen, I think this is kind of a pivot here. And I was at that time, I was very much stuck in I am helping people, I am being creative in my role. But it was you continuing to say that to me more than one time, a few times,
Yeah.
probably before I finally got the message where I was like, wait a minute, maybe she's on to something. But can you talk about how people can use astrology from a directional purpose? Because I think that's what it gave to me in terms of it's not this magic wand. It's, you're not a witch who's doing a spell or looking into the future or anything like that. But can you talk a little bit more about how you do it from a directional purpose? Because I think that's one of the things that you're very talented at.
Thank you. This is the whole purpose of astrology is the empowerment component. And actually what you're touching on is exactly what I hear from all my clients, which is I don't know what to do next. I'm feeling torn between decision A, decision B, and I don't know what to do. Or I hear often, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm in a funk. What is wrong with me? And to me, that's the empowering part of astrology. So, in your case, for example, I could look at the charts and the transits and the planets and all of it, and I could say, there's something bigger going on here. I really want you to be open to different ideas. And I remember during your solar return, just for the astrology geeks, you had Pluto right on your MC, which Pluto is about transformation. And your MC line is all about your public persona. It's your career. And I remember telling you, I really want you to rethink what you think is possible in terms of your
Hmm.
public self. So it's those types of insights that can really help ground people in the present and help kind of give them the feeling of, okay, number one, I'm not going crazy. Like, this is real, what I'm feeling. And also, number two, there's a purpose behind it. What is happening to me today and what is the purpose? So, if you think about your situation, I mean, you could sit there and wallow in the idea of why did this happen to me? Why me? Why did this happen? Or you could take it as maybe this was the shove I needed to force myself to do something different. And that's kind of where astrology can come in to say there was a purpose behind this. There was a reason this happened. It's not just for someone just didn't like you that day and decided this was going to be this was going to be your Friday. But the third part too is it can kind of help frame what you're going through. It can also put some time frame next to it. There are certain periods of our life that things don't feel great. Things feel hard and they feel heavy and they're harder emotionally. Like, this is part of life. These are the cycles we go through. And sometimes, even though the answer is not, oh, don't worry, you're going to feel better tomorrow. But sometimes, even when the answer is, I hear you, I see you, I understand what you're feeling, and it's not forever, it kind of helps reframe it for you to say, okay, you were able to name and justify and validate what I'm feeling. Here's the purpose behind it. Here's what I should focus on. And I know this is going to feel different in a few months. And I just need to get through these few months. I have so many examples of this. So if I could just share a couple.
Yeah.
I had a client who was grieving. The client had just experienced a death in the family and, just felt very lost, as many people do when they are grieving a death in the family. And so what's really important during that time is to really nurture yourself during those periods. And so I gave this client, like, when I tell you to nurture yourself, I really want you to do X, Y, and Z. That's what I want you to focus on for the next 6 months. And she walked away and she's like, oh my God, that's exactly what I needed. I felt like I'm just swimming in this deep sea of grief. I needed someone to say, focus on, the three dots in front of you, if you will. And she told me later, like, it just really kind of helped her move her forward versus sitting there and feeling crummy all day, every day. And another example, this is my own personal example. In my day job, things were terrible. I was so stressful. Things were so intense. The workload was insane. I was miserable in my day job. But so one night I got done working really late. I sat on the couch and I started looking at my charts and I'm like, when is this going to end? And kind of just going chart by chart by chart until I could find something that, okay, gave me a little bit more answers. And I could tell from the charts that, okay, in 6 months, things are going to feel very different. And in that moment, nothing changed about my job. I mean, yes, the workload had lightened up a little bit, but I still had the same job, still the same team, the same leadership, the same clients. All of it was the same. But the energy had changed and it was a noticeable shift. But in that moment, when I'm sitting on the couch at 9:30 at night, like, just knowing in 6 months, okay, you can hold it together for 6 more months. You can do 6 months. Even just that little nugget was all I needed to kind of help reframe my mindset to say, all right, I can make a different decision about this job, but I'm not going to do anything for another 6 months. And then in 6 months, I'm going to decide, what do I need to do if I need to do anything different? And sure enough, 6 months later, things were in a much better place. And just things felt a lot easier. So I kind of give those examples as that to me is what's so empowering about astrology. It's number one, kind of helping people find their guiding light when they're feeling like there's no guiding light. Number two, it's like that reframing and kind of putting a timeline next to it. And then the third thing, which I can use you as an example, is really about giving that direction when you're feeling very lost. And I'm sure, during our conversations after, the separation from your job happened and everything, I'm sure you would have loved for me to come on and tell you, oh, you'll have a new offer in your mailbox in 3 months. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Everything's good. But that wasn't the message I was giving. And I was telling you, this is a pivot. This is a change. Again, it can just be so empowering to know, okay, I wasn't necessarily meant to just take up another job in the same field, in the same career that I had been doing. Instead, maybe I need to be open to what this looks like. And again, neither you or I had the answer at that moment. But I hope it kind of helped reframe your mindset to kind of think outside the box a little bit, at least.
Well, I definitely think that's one of the things that it did, being in that moment. So just having lost my job
Hmm.
suddenly was it was hard because you feel like a personal failure
Yeah.
yourself. And so I think it took the time to process through that. And luckily I had some time available to be able to even work through the grief of losing that piece of it. And then to get over the feelings of anger and I felt very betrayed by people that I had trusted during that process. So getting over that portion of it and being able to then really sit down and say, I wasn't happy. I thought it was just at certain situations. But then when I took the time to step back away from everything and really look at stuff, then I realized, I do love this impact that I get to make on people's lives by helping them get a job and watching them grow and helping them grow and helping the company grow and go do big things. But I always felt like I could make a bigger impact or a different impact that might affect more people than just those people that were working in
Mhm.
that company kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so I think you telling me, listen, I see a pivot here and I see you doing something more creative, more public, made me open to the idea that, hey, maybe it is time to do something different. And what does that look like? I think that one of the biggest things that people have come to me since I started doing this and have been saying, especially recently, is I feel like I need to do something different, but I just don't know what that is. And I want to be really honest here. It's not like they're going to come to you and you're going to be like, oh, you should go do
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
But I do think that it did give me some direction and at least some direction to be open
Yeah. Yeah.
to what
But
might be out there.
exactly. But that's also like, I can take a look at a birth chart and I can tell somebody. Actually, this just happened at an event. One of the clients came up to me at an event and she's like, I'm in IT, I'm doing this, and I'm not getting great reviews, quite honestly, from my bosses. They're continuing to tell me I'm messing up. I don't know what I'm doing and blah, 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 blah. She was very kind of spun up in the fact that she was feeling a lot of frustration that this is the field that she has gone to school for and she started her career in this, and yet she wasn't getting satisfaction, and not even for herself. She still enjoyed her job, but it was clear her leadership was not really valuing her input. Like there was definitely clear, like there's a mismatch here. And she's like, I don't know, should I go and get another degree in this field? And I'm like, wait a minute. When I look at your chart, I really want you to do something that has a lot more focus on how can you be doing something that's more nurturing. So she had mentioned trying to teach a class, and I'm like, yeah, but who was that class for? And she's like, oh, it was for a bunch of adults. And she was on the younger side. It was from a bunch of adults. And I'm like, no, I really want you to actually focus on maybe teaching younger people and making a connection and like maybe even mentorship with younger people. There's a huge part of your birth chart that really speaks to that aspect. Having emotional connections with people is something that's really important to you. Being able to, again, kind of play that nurturing role in some way, shape, or form, and being in a position that allows you to support other people in some way. I said, I think that's what's missing in your career. I just felt like she was going down the wrong road, quite honestly.
Hmm.
And she needed more of that, what I just mentioned, in her life in some way. Maybe it's not even her job, maybe it's a volunteering component. But either way, to me, that's where astrology becomes empowering because I can tell by your chart, these are your gifts. And sometimes we have like kind of a knowing about our gifts, like, oh, yeah, we get feedback along the road of life that people say, hey, you're actually really good at this. Oh, good. But there are so many other things that maybe you have no idea about that you're actually really talented at. And I know that's true for me. I had no idea. And then I continued to study my birth chart. I'm like, oh, actually, there's components here that I have never tapped into that I really need to tap into. So that in itself, again, is another way that astrology can be so empowering because it can give you more insight. You're pedaling down the wrong road, like maybe add something different there and see where that takes you.
Can we talk a little bit about manifesting?
Hmm.
Because you're the one who also got me started on manifesting. And I think it's been really integral in helping me find my direction. So, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I love, again, I know I've said this a million times, but to me, this is where the empowering component of astrology comes in. So, manifesting from an astrological perspective, I really tie it to the powers of a new moon. Everybody knows of a full moon because it's very visible. Everybody can see it. If you watch a movie, it's a night scene. It's the full moon's almost always out there because it's, beautiful. The opposite of a full moon, though, is called a new moon. It's also known as the dark of the moon because you can't even see it. So as the moon waxes and wanes, it is the point where the moon is it's the darkest of the moon. So again, you cannot see it. The significance of a new moon is that it is an auspicious time to plant seeds of intention. And in fact, if you go back centuries and centuries and centuries, astrology was much more integrated in the everyday lives of people. And many people, they could see the stars. The Mesopotamians could even see some planets. They were some of the first people to be able to identify planets in the sky. And they often planned their days, weeks, months according to the stars and what they were able to track. More significantly, farmers from centuries ago would plant their seeds in alignment with the new moon. The Farmer's Almanac, for example, is essentially what it was based on, was astrology. So just like farmers can plant literal seeds at the new moon, either the Aries new moon or the Taurus new moon, depending on where in the hemisphere they're located, you also have the ability to plant seeds of your own intention. And it's like doing it at this specific time is like sprinkling a little fertilizer and putting these words into the universe to say, this is what I want for myself. Now, one could argue, and I would fully support, you can technically manifest at any time. And it's never a bad thing to write down, to think through and write down what do you want. But for me, especially as an astrologer, I always do it in alignment with the new moon. Because again, just like a farmer can plant literal seeds, we have the opportunity to plant figurative seeds in terms of what do we want for ourselves. I have a million stories of clients, and I talk a lot about manifesting and a lot of the work I do, even one-on-one with clients, I will talk about manifesting. I was at a school event and I had one of my clients come up to me and say, "You will not believe what came true for me." She's like, "I followed your instructions on the manifesting," and listed like 5 things that had happened in just the last 5 months. And she's like, "You can call it coincidence if you want, but these things are not things that would just happen out of circumstance. They were very unique things that happened to her, and they were all part of her manifesting." It works for sure.
Yeah, I think simply the act of writing it down forces you to get serious about what it is that you want in your
Mhm.
life. And I love and I do go back every new moon and revisit that and kind of look at what I wrote the last time and what things may have changed.
The one thing I will say is when you write it down, if you don't have immediate peace and calm when you write it, it's not the right one. So it's something to be mindful of. Like maybe there was, and I'm saying this from my own, but like when you think about sometimes we get in our head and we think about, I want to be a vice president and, blah, 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 and I want to make this much money. But when you write it down, you still have some anxieties that come up. You maybe have some tightness in you that come up. It's like, okay, maybe I need to come back on that. Maybe that's not exactly what I want. Maybe that's not as true. So I scratch it out and I start again. Let's go that couple steps deeper. What is it about those titles or about whatever that I'm looking for? So that's something to keep in mind is if it doesn't feel like a peaceful thing when you write it down, that's a huge clue. Maybe this isn't the right one for me.
I think the other thing that you always say too is that it has to be about you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can't manifest on other people. It won't work. You can't manifest. And I tell my younger clients that are still on the dating scene, I tell them this on a regular basis. You can't say, I want so and so to like me. I mean, I remember doing this all the time when I was in, middle school, high school even, like, writing down who your crush was,
Yeah.
and wanting them to like you as much as you like them, but it doesn't work. It didn't work then, and it still doesn't work. And now I have the proof to show, like, it doesn't work. I tell my younger clients, instead of writing down, "I want so and so to like me," instead, the way I would phrase it is, "I wanna be in a partnership that I find rewarding and fulfilling." So you kinda switch it to, okay, you want so and so to like you, but what's underneath that? Is it you wanna be in a couple, like, you wanna be in a relationship? Is that it? Then write that down. Is it that you want that validation, let's say? Okay, then write that down. Like, write down that validate that's what you want is the validation. 'Cause it's doesn't always manifest exactly how you think, but it often does manifest, just not exactly as maybe you had planned. So
I like that. I like the what's underneath the want there.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
So if somebody were to come to you for a reading, can you kind of tell them what to expect? Like I said, it's not like you're going to wave a magic wand and
Mhm.
look into a crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly. My readings are not about crystal balls. They're really about understanding what's in front of you right now and answering that question. A lot of times I have clients come to me with exactly everything that we've talked about today. I feel very lost. I need some direction. This happened to me. Why is it happening? When is it going to be over? Am I going crazy? And those are a lot of what I hear. Or sometimes it's, a little bit more light. It's a lighter than that. It's, hey, I'm having a birthday. I want to know what I need to expect for this coming year. Like, what are some of the themes from a prediction perspective or timing, I would say, of what I can expect in the coming year? So that's really what I focus on is understanding what is your current situation and how this might play out, but again, also giving you areas to focus on. There are some years that are really positive for relationships, and you may have more friendships coming into your life. Or again, if you're on the younger side, more partnerships coming into your life. And there are other years where it's meant to be more of a quiet year for you. And to me, it's really helpful to know when those years are because if you try to push yourself or make things happen when it's just not the time for it, it's not the year for it, you're going to burn yourself out pretty quickly. And there's years where it's a career year for you, and other years where it's not. And again, if you kind of have that knowing, it really helps to help yourself kind of frame that. Another example I can give was this last year I had again for the astrology nerds that might be listening, I had Jupiter in my 12th house, which is it's many things, but one of the biggest things, the way that this manifests is exhaustion. You just, it's just not as easy to do all the things you were doing. And it's on purpose. The universe or God, I use those terms interchangeably. It's asking you to kind of slow down. And you will find you just don't have the same amount of energy. And you also have feelings of wanting to be home and wanting to kind of be in a little bit of a cocoon type of state. And there were so many opportunities and so many times throughout this last year where someone would say, "Hey, why don't you join us and do this? Why don't you come over and do this?" And if I didn't know my astrology, I would have been like, "Yeah, I should. I should go and I should do that. I should go and visit with these people and this and this." But I knew my astrology. Well, first of all, I wasn't feeling it. I just was not feeling up to it. But I also gave myself that permission like, this isn't the time for that. This isn't the time to be social. This isn't the time for all of the relationship building. I really need to take care of myself right now. So to me, again, I know I'm a broken record, but that's so empowering because if I would have pushed myself to go be this social person that I definitely did not feel at the time, it wouldn't have ended up well for anybody. I would have been absolutely wiped. I probably wouldn't have been a lot of fun. And it would have taken me a lot longer to recover from that, which would have impacted my work and my kids, all the things when we're not at our best. So that to me is another component that you can use astrology for is, hey, what do I have to look forward to this year? What do I need to know that can really help me set my expectations, but kind of help guide my energy as well.
So, one of the things that you've mentioned is the birth charts in houses.
Hmm.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, from an astrological perspective, a lot of people know their sun sign. Like, your sun sign is a Leo. But in my opinion, the knowing your sun sign kind of giveth and it taketh away from astrology. It gives to astrology because it's like an easy entry point, if you will. You only have to know your date of birth and your sun sign, and you can read your horoscopes and have that connection to astrology. But it also kind of takes away from astrology because the reality is you have all 10 planets in your astrological birth chart. It's not just the sun. That's only one component. You have 9 other aspects and even more actually if you want to get technical. And when I say your astrological birth chart, that is essentially a picture of the sky the minute you took your first breath. So, where were all the planets when you were born? What sign was this planet in? Because the way that the planets orbit, they fall in different astrological signs. So, that's your birth chart. And when I'm looking at your birth chart from an astrology perspective, I'm looking at all the planets. Where are they showing up? What does that tell me about who you are? What nurtures you? What do you love? What are those talents that I was talking about earlier? But also, what are the challenges that you're here to overcome? But as you look at the birth chart, you will also notice it's a circle. It's actually, I have them right here behind me, but it's a circle and it looks like a pizza pie, if you will, and it's cut into slices. So when you think about the planets in the universe, that is the sky. The sky is big, huge. How are you going to divide up the sky into different sections? Because otherwise it's just massive. So astrologers don't quite agree on exactly how you divide up the sky, but they do agree that you need to divide up the sky. So those divisions that I mentioned, like those pizza slices, those are called houses. I don't know why they call them houses. That's just what they call them. And the houses represent where something tends to happen in your chart. So when you think about career, what sign is in the career house of your chart? What planets might be there? Because that's going to give me, as an astrologer, great insight in terms of how you should be treating your career. What are some of the great things that you can do for your career? Where are you gifted? How should you be known? Like, what should you go after? How do you show up in your career? Like, all those things can be answered by looking at your astrological birth chart and narrowed down more by the houses because they kind of divide the sky up and point to exactly where in your life something might be happening or how something has manifested, for example. To go back to one of the first things I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I was mentioning I saw a post about the planet Uranus and how it shows up in your birth chart. So for me, Uranus shows up in what they call my fourth house, which is all about home and family. And when you have a planet like Uranus showing up there, it often brings instability or wanting change or going against the grain or doing something different when it comes to your home and family. And again, reading just this little blurb about it, it was so eye-opening to me because it's true. Like, I never wanted to stay in where I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I always had this itch to do something different. And then there's always that part of you that's like, but you're crazy. You have a huge network in Omaha, Nebraska. There's so many benefits for you staying there. Why would you want to move? Also, moving's hard. Why would you want to do that? But it
Moving across
really,
country, halfway across country.
yeah, not easy. I mean, I was young, so everything's easier when you're younger, but it's still not an easy thing to do. But it also explained to me, oh, yeah, I relate to that a lot because I never felt very settled. Like I wanted to do something different that nobody else had done when it comes to building my home and my life. So that's the houses. I hope that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot that July is supposed to be a really good month from everybody that's jumping up on my Instagram algorithms. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, July is a really big month, I would say. A lot happening in July. And in fact, The bottom half of the year, so the later half of the year, is going to look very different than the first half of the year. And I'm going to try to narrow that down to, mm, okay, four things. I can only do four. I'm going to try to keep myself to four things. Number one, we have all of the outer planets. So the outer planets are the Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They move very slowly. Pluto has an orbit of like 248 years or something like. I don't remember the exact number. Neptune 162 years. Like these planets don't move very often. They're called generational planets because entire generations are born with these planets in one sign. Versus you have the sun, for example, who spends just a month in one sign. So it's a month versus years and years and years and years, decades sometimes. We have now entered, as of July 2026, all of these outer planets, so the five I just mentioned, are in brand new signs. So the fact that all five of them have recently, like within the last 18 months, changed signs, it's like a whole refresh for the collective. So we are coming out of what we call the water signs and the earth signs. And we're moving into the air and fire signs. Water and earth signs tend to be more emotional and they tend to be more kind of stuck. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Let's stick with the institutions that work and have worked for decades. Let's not change things up because we know these work. But it's also a little bit more emotional, like how are you feeling? And if you think about the collective, let's just say over the last 10 years, you can start to feel, when I kind of put words to it, you can kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Think about all the institutions that I think there's a big rising happening where people are saying, hey, wait a minute, that institution doesn't work for me anymore. Think about the space of retail and how different retail is. For a long time, we had brick and mortar stores and that's it. I mean, yes, we had an online presence. We've had online presence for retail since 1997, but it's not until very, very recently that the actual brick and mortar structure is changing dramatically for retail. Amazon is now the number one retailer versus Walmart, who held that spot for so long. But also from a government perspective, I think there's a lot of people questioning what we've had from a government structure for a very long time, for decades, maybe even centuries. Is that really serving the people anymore? I think that's a question that's coming up. And then if you think about the emotional part of things, again, if we go back like for the last 10 years, I'm sure you can relate that there was a lot of conversation around people's feelings. And now we have safe spaces and we're trying to be very inclusive. Like these are very water type of traits. Whether you agree with it or not, this is part of our lexicon. Like we are now much more sensitive to other people's needs. And some people like that and some people don't. But the reality is that is now part of our culture. And recognizing, for example, mental health. That is something that was never talked about 10 years ago. But now it's becoming a much more popular thing. And people are so much more aware about stress levels and ensuring that they feel good physically, but also mentally. Those are all very water and earth type of topics. So what's happened over the last 18 months and became final in 2026, actually this July, is moving away from those astrological components and moving into air and fire. So if you think about what happens with air and fire, that's like a wildfire on a windy day. Things are taking off. And information, air represents information, the passing of information. So the last time we had this type of configuration, and it wasn't exact, but it's the closest thing we've had in our recent memory, was 1998. And if you think back to 1998, that was really when the internet took off. Like, yes, it had been around for longer, but 1998 is when it really started taking off. You had the movie Titanic open up, which represented 5 years of work that manifested and was like the blockbuster at the time. It was like the highest grossing movie of all time, but it wasn't something that just happened. It took a lot of years of work before it became successful. You had the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal as well. So things were kind of like starting to happen. We weren't in this like stuck phase of the earth and the water, we were much more, things were coming to fruition. Windows 98 came out, like things were happening in that time period. So that's kind of where we are now. So if things felt really stuck over the last couple years, especially now that we have these really important outer planets in air and fire, things are going to move. That's really what's happening. The second thing that we have happening is we have uh, I can't even remember the name of this configuration. It's escaping me right at the moment. But this configuration that we've had against all of the outer planets is a very positive configuration in the way that they're relating to each other, but it hasn't happened in hundreds and hundreds of years. So from an astrologer perspective, we're all geeking out about this. Like, this is so cool to be a part of it and how it's lining up and everything. That doesn't really mean anything to anybody else because it does not mean anything significant is going to happen in July. But it does kind of set you up for, okay, things are shifting. Like, we're in a new era for sure. The third thing I would speak to is we have a nodal shift. Again, this is getting technical and a little bit geeky, but along with kind of that water and earth components and kind of feelings I was
Uh-huh.
saying earlier, we have the nodes shifting to the signs of Leo and Aquarius, which again are fire and air. The nodes, which is short for the moon's nodes, they are the little horseshoe symbol. Like, again, if you look at a birth chart for anyone who's familiar with this, they indicate a different area of your life is going to be ripe for change. Things are going to change in a new area of your life. When the nodes shift signs, which only happens once every 18 months or so, it really shifts to another part of your life that's going to be highlighted. And things are going to change in this new life. So, again, another indicator of change. So, you have all of that happening. And then you also have Saturn, your buddy Saturn, is going to be
I hate
stationing.
her.
It's going to be what we call stationing retrograde. And we have Mercury, which is going to be stationing direct. We're in Mercury retrograde right now, but we're going to have Mercury stationing direct all within the next couple of weeks. Also, Neptune is going to be stationing retrograde. When planets station, like I just mentioned, when they're changing direction, which they're not actually changing direction, it's an optical illusion from Earth, but this is what we say when, as astrologers, it brings a burst of that planet's energy. And sometimes, again, this is very dependent on the chart, it can stir up things happening for you as an individual, or even sometimes as a collective, depending on where it's happening and what's taking place. So all of what I just described is happening in July. I have been looking forward to this since last year. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything significant is going to happen to any one of us, but it's definitely going to be a record in the record books to say this is where things started to move, started to change. It's probably nothing we're going to be able to put our finger on and say, yes, this happened in July 2026. But when we look back in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it would not surprise me if there are things that kind of link back to this time period as starting to brew in some way, shape, or form. So that's July. Again, I know I'm an astrologer geeky, but also I'm going to be personally impacted by these configurations. So I'm really excited about this.
So let's talk about if somebody wants to do a reading with you. You have all types of readings.
Yes. Yeah. So, all the readings can touch on everything that we've talked about today, depending on what you want to cover, but it's very specific to what you as a client are going through. I definitely want to ensure that anyone listening gets the value that they came for, the answers that they're looking for, the direction that they're coming for. So I have many different options you can choose from on the website in terms of your career, your love life, relationships in general. Also, just understanding your birth chart. That can be an entire hour conversation on what that can tell you. Really, really powerful reading about, again, what are your gifts? What are you here to let go of? But also just a monthly review or maybe just a yearly review. Like things are fine. I don't have anything dramatic. I get that a lot too. I just want to know what to expect this month. What are some things I need to be mindful of? But also from a yearly perspective. Every year you have a reset on your birthday of the energy. And it's very common. I get a lot of readings at that time to say, tell me about this year coming up. What should I lean into? What's not? So those are the readings. I do have a special happening right now. If you use the code podcast, when you book the reading, you will receive a discount. So fun.
Awesome. I'll have
Yeah.
to share that out there on the show notes. Anything we need to know before we wrap up?
So on Tuesday, July 14th, we have a new moon in Cancer. Great time to start manifesting, as we were just talking about, writing down your goals, your own wishes, your intentions. It's kind of helps to put your manifestations in the sign that the new moon is happening in. It's happening in Cancer. So you can think about, what do you want for your family? What do you want for your home? Where do you feel like you may need more nurturing, or how you might need to nurture other people? Those are things you don't have to keep it to those topics, but if you're looking for direction, think along those lines. And that's a great way to kind of align it with the season.
Awesome.
That's it.
And people can find you on starlightastrology.net
That's right.
and on all of the socials.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Starlight Astrology 23 is my handle. Feel free to look me up and send me a DM. Would love to connect with anyone that's listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Marci, for being here and for being a guide for me in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Until next time. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this week. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We've got more exciting interviews and solo episodes lined up that you won't want to miss. See you here every Monday. And remember, it's just one intentional thing every day that gets you to your dream life. Until next week, be careful out there.